Kathleen, I asked you a question. Am I male or female?
I don't know you, Farah, so how would I know?
I'm a trans woman.
Well, then I'm afraid you're genetically male. Yes.
Exactly, and this is...
It's a fact, it's in your biology, it was determined at conception. I'm sorry.
You don't accept trans...
No, I don't accept you change sex, I'm afraid. I don't think it's scientifically possible. I think transness is a way of being what you always were. You're still a man, you're still a woman. I'm a woman. I'm a woman if I cut my breasts off. I'm a woman if I take testosterone for 20 years. I'm a woman if I get facial hair, if I have a synthetic penis put in. You know, I'm just a... There are many different ways to be a woman. There are many different ways to be a man. I know trans people for whom that works. You know, they don't have to say, I'm a woman. You know, a trans woman does not have to insist to herself that she's a woman.
The term transgender includes a wide range of identities, not only those who are physically transitioned.
There are plenty of trans people out there who can actually acknowledge biological reality and still say they are a woman, or still say they're trans. You know, but there are internal fights within the spectrum of trans. Why are we so obsessed around genitals and bodily organs and all the rest of it? At the end of the day, if someone's behaving well in society, you know, their body parts don't matter. But yes, at the end of the day as well, also body parts are often what we can use to oppress each other and commit crimes. But again, I've said this before, but it's the crimes that need to be monitored in that sense, not the genital policing.
In the year following Sarah Everard's murder, despite the public outcry, 125 women were killed by men. Male violence, and the question of who might or might not pose a threat to women, has become one of the central issues for both sides.
I got involved in this debate because of my work on male violence against women and girls. I volunteered in a domestic violence refuge, on a rape crisis line. Now, we set up those spaces not because all men are sexual predators, but because enough are to mean that women can't tell who is and who isn't going to harm them. And then along came some trans-identified males, trans women, who said, we have the right to be in those spaces. Now, we'd set them up in order to keep men out, and that means all men.
How do we operationalise safeguarding on a massive scale when we're dealing with, there's no one at the door saying you can come in, not you, so we've got to have social norms. Which ones do we have? Do we have ones that say if you look like a hulking great bloke you can go into the ladies? I would say no, because that allows any hulking great bloke to go into the ladies.
You've got this tiny demographic of trans people, including trans women. I don't see how trans women having access to women-only toilets would somehow curtail women's rights as well. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are cis women. They're all trans allies. They all support trans rights. So it's very difficult to talk about women's rights versus trans rights.
The focus on trans women accessing women's spaces has become one of the most contentious issues.
Hello guys, come on then, come on. It's okay to recognise that you can be perceived as dangerous. It doesn't mean that you are. And I remember being in a women's toilet very recently with a female friend, and we'd gone in there. We thought we were the only people in there, so we were chatting between the walls. And while I was doing that, I suddenly realised, you know what? If someone else comes in quietly, or someone else was already in here that we didn't know about, they're going to hear a male voice. They'll be freaked out of their skin, quite probably. So it made me actually stum up.
I was in a pub a couple of weekends ago, and there were no gender-neutral toilets. It was either men's or women's, and the place was heaving. And I had not an anxiety attack exactly, but I was a little bit worried because going into a women-only toilet, would someone confront me or so on? And in the end, I didn't go. I went home. I finished my drink, and I hugged my friend goodbye and said, I'm going home now. And I went home and I went to the toilet, and then I just stayed in for the rest of the night. Having almost this internalized, self-hate sometimes, and thinking, do I have the right? Do I belong? How trans am I? How woman am I? I'm not woman enough. I should just go home. I understand the anger and even a sense of paranoia about women-only spaces, who gets to come in, for example. But the way that it's got out of control, as I see it, in terms of the level of almost this blanket ban now, no trans women in our spaces.
Why is it that trans women can't see that it's about keeping men out of our spaces? And unfortunately, much as trans women may well want to rely on the fiction, they are not women, they are trans women.
The possibility that men could abuse a system of self-identification has become highly controversial.
Today, with so many men being opportunistic sex offenders against women and girls, being able to wander very casually into this identity of woman, it's a danger. We have to be alert to it.
Tensions have become heightened on both sides by cases that make the headlines, like the recent situation in Scotland, where a double rapist who transitioned from male to female was briefly housed in a women's prison before being moved after a public outcry.
There are predatory males in society, and a minority of them may also cross-dress. A minority of them may also transition, and a minority of them may also fraudulently use gender self-ID or whatever it might be. But the issue is that male perversion, male threat, male violence, and I'm totally anti that at every single step of the way. And if some of that is the bad apples in the trans camp, then I think we should own our bad apples, but also recognise that the majority just want to get on with life.
The sad fact is that most abusive men are in people's homes, are people they know, are people they work with, or are in institutions alongside. Abusive, sexually violent men do not need to transition to live as trans women in order to be sexually violent to women and children. Sadly, that is a daily occurrence.
In England and Wales, nearly 1 in 4 women has reported being a victim of rape or sexual assault, and a woman is killed every 3 days by a man. But reliable figures indicating how many or how few attacks involve people identifying as trans are not available.
We're not. We never assumed that actual men were all sexual predators. We knew enough of them were in order to need women-only facilities. And that's why there's a danger. Because, of course, it's far more normalised now for men to be able to just identify themselves into the category of woman and to have some legal rights to do so.
Women won't wish means women won't be silenced, and several hundred were outside the Scottish Parliament demanding to be heard.
The legal right to self-ID has been introduced in several countries, but has divided the UK. In Scotland, a controversial gender reform bill has recently been blocked by the UK government.
This idea that men would wake up in the morning and say, suddenly I'm a woman, that isn't what the Gender Recognition Act is. You still need to make a legal declaration. It's just a much less cumbersome process than it was previously. I do have friends who are trans people, and we all share one thing in common, which is a sense of distress at how this niche piece of policy making turned into this existential questioning of trans people's identities.
In terms of how gender is understood, younger adults are much more likely to support self-identification most young people will know people that don't use designated sex pronouns. They'll use words like Z, or they'll say they, fixed by younger adults increasingly.
Many people go through life without thinking about gender at all. I know that I did not consider my gender at all until I was meeting people who had those thought processes already.
Yeah.
And at that point, you're right. I think something about what actually is masculinity to me.
In something that ends up being, for better or worse, quite important in day-to-day life. It's just almost, I feel, nice to know that you actively claimed your gender and that you recognise who you are more fully, in the same way that you'd want to know more about yourself in any other way.
I think new generations don't want to be boxed in to, well, newer generations are calling for that to be formally recognised, and that
Not accurate, and I think really stamps on just people that feel a completely wide range of things, and especially when there have been documents all throughout history of people that feel that there's not just men and women, there's not just this and that, and it's just, I think it just is something that is infinitely more complex.
It's something that you can discover about yourself. You don't have to associate it with it particularly. You don't have to feel that you need to act on it, but you also can if you need to.
It can really be quite difficult to live in a world that not only doesn't understand you, but is specifically being hampered from understanding you, I guess, as I put it. In saying, oh, there are only two genders, we want a debate about gender and sex, can be damaging. And then especially some of the more extreme comments that are just downright offensive completely in themselves can cause worse things than that.
I feel like I've put a lot of effort in my life into being able to just kind of slip under the radar and not be particularly noticeable or objectionable, but I feel so threatened by the way the public sphere